Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Average. This is a beginner's guide to Bun. In today's episode, we're going to cover a few things. The first thing being Bun image conversion, because I started this series on an older version of Bun where there was no Bun.Image, but that is actually a new addition to Bun in, I believe, literally the latest release of Bun. So we can use that to replace Sharp completely. And I'm going to do that super quickly. It'll only take about a minute. And then after that, we're going to look at some more file IO stuff. We're going to move away from the web API that we have here. I feel like it's holding us back a little bit, and look at some more CLI based stuff. We have our 2PNG that we were working on in the last episode. I've already done bun remove sharp, as well as this either open up PowerShell as an administrator or do sudo bun upgrade if you're running Linux. Make sure that you have the latest version of Bun because you're going to need it to use Bun.Image. With that being said, we can get rid of the sharp import here, and instead of doing await sharp, we can do new Bun.Image just like so. We can get rid of the to buffer here. We can actually keep everything else. .png will work just fine, and we just need to do await bytes. Perfect. So now if we go to Bruno and we go to convert to PNG, I already have a file added to the body here. And if I actually start it up, you'll notice that we get the image. Bun.image also allows you to do some other stuff like resizing. We can do .resize and we can say 200 by 200 for the width and the height. That will output a smaller image. We can do other things like .flip. That will flip it vertically. There's a ton of stuff that you can do with Bun.image. I'm going to leave the docs in the description below, so if you're interested in that, give it a look. Now we are going to actually make a new folder. This is going to be a fresh project, so if you don't remember how to start a new Bun project, it's super easy. We just do bun init, we can say blank, and boom, there we go. Now we have a Bun project, and it actually looks like maybe they fixed they actually have types added in there by default in this new version of Bun. Amazing. I want to look at some file structure management, so what I'm going to do is I have already created a testdir right here. This is just a bunch of random files that I created. I have a random directory with an image and a thing.txt with just some raw text. And then our root tester has this. It has a config.json, another random.txt in here. We are going to look at writing our own files, deleting files, listing file directories, parsing different file types like JSON, as well as archiving all of these files together and outputting a zip file. So we're going to actually do some different scripts in this video. We are going to have an index.ts, but we are just going to call this list. This is going to list all of the files in our directory testdir. So we're kind of creating like a little isolated file system that works with Bun here. So we can do const files, and to actually list directories, we need to import readdir from node:/promises. Like I said before, Bun is cross-compatible and interoperable with Node. As of right now, for some reason in Bun, there's no way to manage directories. Here we can say files readdir, and then we need to give it our path. So that would just be test_dir. And we can also pass it an option recursive true. What this will do is actually not give us the files, but rather all the file names. So if I do a console.log file names, and if I bun run list.ts, just like so, we'll get an array of every file that's inside of tester, including all of the ones in any nested directories. What I am going to do next is import our parse args from util as we did in a previous video. This allows us to parse arguments. And here we're actually just going to destructure our positionals. That's all I really want. We're going to say allow positionals. Now, what this will allow us to do is if we log our positionals here and we run the script again, we'll get nothing. But if I put in something like ASD, you'll notice we get that after. We're going to use the first positional here. And if I run that, we'll just notice that we get ASD as raw text. This is going to be our nested directory. So we're going to call it nested directory name, and it's going to be as value of positional 0. But we actually need to do something else. What we're going to do here is instead of just giving it the value of positional 0, what we're going to do is if this actually even has a value, we're going to return test_dir / and then we're going to put our positional 0 just like that. Otherwise, it's literally just going to be test_dir. Now we can slot that into our nested directory name. So if I run the command, you'll notice we get all of them, including nested directories. If I do this and I add, let's say random_dir, we'll get all the files that are just in random_dir. dir. The next thing I am going to do is show you how to write files. So we're going to say write.ts. Again, we're going to import our parse args, except positionals here. So how is this going to work? We're going to check if there are two positionals, and if there aren't, we're just going to throw an error. This error is just going to say need two positionals, file name, and contents. Now we can do file name equals, and we are going to make that our first positional, just like so. The second positional, which is positionals 1, is going to be the contents of the file. The way that this command is going to work is we're going to say bun run write, give it a file name. Then after that, we're going to give it literally anything else the user types in, write it directly to the file. Something we can do instead of just doing positionals 1 is we can actually say positionals slice 1. So we're going to slice it after 1 and then just join everything with a space. So all positionals after the first will be joined together, and that will be the file content. Next, we're going to say await bun.write. We're going to give it the destination, which will be our file name. Then we need to give it our contents. Now, if we do bun run and we say write.ts, we can give it a file name. We're just going to say thing.txt, and then we're going to give it some content. So here is some content in the file. If we look here, we now have thing.txt. Here's some content in the file. So now we have writing files. We do not yet have reading JSON files or reading files in general. So how do we do that? We can make a new one, read.ts. We're just going to copy over our parse args here. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to say const file name equals positionals. That's going to be positional 0. If there's no file name, we are going to throw a new error. The next thing we're going to do is get the file. We're going to say bun.file, and we're going to put file name inside of here. Next, we need to see if await file.exists. This is a method, and we can not it just like so. If it doesn't exist, throw a new error. Okay, then we can say just console.log, and we are just going to do file.text. We actually need to await this because it is going to be a promise. There we go. That is the text that we have in there. It's just a bunch of random gibberish. We can read it. What if I want to parse a JSON object like the config.json we have here? Right now, this is basically just plain text, and you could parse it if you want, but what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to say if file name dot ends with, and we're going to say JSON. We can say console.log await file.json instead and return. Because we can only use this in a function body, what I am going to do is I'm going to create a new async function, and I'm just going to say main, and we're going to put all of this stuff inside of here. At the bottom here, I'm just going to call main. So if I do config.json, as you can see now, we get the parsed information, we get proper syntax highlighting in the console, we get the field names, all of that good stuff. So now we can parse text or JSON, and it will be outputted nicely. Next thing we're going to do is create a script that will delete a file. This is super easy. Copy over this stuff. Positional is going to be our file name. If there's no file name, we're just going to say throw new error const file equals, and we can say bun.file. We're going to give it the file name, and then we're going to say file.delete. Believe we need to await that as well. Make sure you call main at the bottom here. When I type in bun run delete, let's just delete our thing.txt in our root. We should notice that it disappears. Very nice. I think that we should try and do file archiving. So let's just create a new file called zip.ts. This is going to be function main, and we're probably going to need to make it async. So I'm just going to do that right now and call main just right there. For our zip script, we are going to want to create a function that looks like this. We do bun run, our script zip.ts, and then we can specify any files we want to add to an archive. And this archive is going to be outputted to our root directory as something like this, output.tar.gz. We're going to be using bun.archive to do so. Bun.archive only really supports gzip right now, so that's the only compression method we're going to be able to use. I assume in the future there will be more. Okay, so what we need to do is firstly, we need to create a record, which is basically like a dictionary or a map, or I don't know, you've probably seen it in other languages. It's a key value pair. It's a group of them. So it needs to have a string and something called a blob part, and we can just give that a value of nothing. We can import blob part from bun. Then we're going to loop through all of the file names of our positionals array. And the reason why is because our positionals array serves as where we're going to add all of our file names. Okay, so we do const file equals. We're going to say bun.file file name. And you do have to be a bit careful with this because bun files, they do extend blob. They are technically enough to satisfy this blob part. But if I actually look under bun.file method here, it says this blob is lazy. That means it won't do any work until you read from it. The way we can get around that is by checking if the file dot exists. We can make that an await call, and we're going to do files file.name. And if the file name doesn't exist, we're going to do file name equals file. So now we have read the context of the file, checking if it exists, and we are setting the file name to file.name or our file name, which was provided from our positional, if it doesn't exist already, which it really should, but sometimes that is null. And so we satisfy it with that. Okay. So now that we have our records populated with files and the data, we can say const archive equals new bun.archive files and give it an option compress gzip. Next, we just say await bun.archive. We can say output.tar.gz archive.blob. We need to await the blob call. And this is not actually bun.archive, it's bun.write. I don't know. My brain is just absolutely broken right now. Save the file and let's try and run. Okay, so we did get a output.tar.gz here. It is 1 kilobyte. We have our tsconfig.json, which is empty, and we have our config.json, which unfortunately is also empty. I'm not exactly sure why. So for some reason, it's not allowing us to use bun.files as blob parts. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the byte data and just use that instead. So instead of blob part here, I'm going to do uint8 array. This is going to get renamed here. We're just going to say await file.bytes. Let's give it a shot now. Let's see if we get a proper archive for our files. Okay, so our tsconfig.json is 1 kilobyte. There we go. Perfect. And our test.dir also has our config.json with our data inside of there. That's all for today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed and I hope you learned something. If you did, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what you thought. With that being said, I'm Average. Have yourself a great day. Goodbye.